Alright, greetings and welcome back, gentles and ladies. Oh, I didn't do it right. Greetings and welcome back, gentles and ladiesmen, to another Shrek-tastic episode of Exo Plays Donkey Kong Country 3 on the Game Boy Advance-able. Actually, just a second, let me check my waveforms here. Yeah, they look fine. For some reason I thought that they were too loud, that I was clipping for the past few episodes, but thankfully, that was not the case. And I have our timer going, so we should be all set. This level is called Stormy Seas. And what's one thing I do have to give credit to Pacifica for is that in terms of how the stages look, they did surprisingly pull out some stops for it. This background is completely unique. It is not, the assets are not recycled from anything from the original game. Like, maybe the sprites were, like if you dig through the files for the original game, you will find the compressed remains of these sprites, and you can see them and stuff, but they were never actually used in game. Dingy drain pipe, in terms just the color palette and the fact that there was the rising water and stuff, that was something new that we did not see in the original version. And Stormy Seas is kind of the same deal, where like it has a very unique look to it at least. Even if the level design itself is pretty standard for these boardwalk stages. But you know, at this point, considering that these were new stages and they could have turned out in many different ways, I do have to appreciate that even though I feel mixed about Pacifica as an addition, I do have to say, I do appreciate the fact that these levels try to at least look or behave differently than what we already have, instead of just being more of the same. Especially since, you know, we already had Donkey Kong Land 3 and stuff, and all those levels, and these new Pacifica levels feel distinct from even those. So, good on you, DKC3 GBA, for employing some creativity. Gotta point out for that. That bonus room back there, actually, I think is really annoying. I just got kind of in a lucky round with it, but that fucking, whatever it's called, the creeper on the rope. The rope creeper. He's out for blood. And he will go run straight for you. And it's kind of like he defaults to a certain position on the rope. Like there's like a part kind of 3/4 of the way down the rope where if you jump off of the rope, he will just go back to that part of the rope. And if you get yourself in a bad timing with it, it's easy to get killed and then have to start the whole thing over, and it's never fun. I alluded to this earlier, but those creepers there, God, what the fuck are they called? Let me just look it up on DK Wiki real quick. All right, and I am back from my little research expedition. Okay, so the clobber equivalents in this game are called Nakas. And the purple ones that threw the bombs are called Kachukas. The TNT ones are called Krakas. And you know, that sounds disturbingly similar to another word, which I will not say in the show. And gimmick with the Krakas is in the original game, you only saw the kind that was on the ropes. There were sprites for walking versions in the game, but they were never actually used in a stage. Like if you dig through the files of the SNES version, you will find these sprites right there in the game. They're just never used in a level. So Pacifica here actually puts them to good use. And for some reason, in terms of how they behave when you throw them at enemies, they behave differently than clobbers do. Like, if you ran into a TNT clobber with a barrel, it would blow up and you would not be harmed. In this version of the game, if you put one, or rather, in this third game, if you hit a Kraka with a barrel, you will still get hurt. I don't know why. I guess they didn't have time to program the behaviors as well as they would otherwise. And then this one's really easy, like I barely had to try. So, in terms of the ongoing conversation about the music, One track I barely talked about, and there's no opportunity to really talk about it at this point because we've already beaten K3 and seen the last of the snow levels. The level is... what is that song called? This is just a day of me having a bad memory is what it is. Let me look it up in my iTunes real quick. Let me pull up the game because I have all the music, don't you know? Frosty Frolics is what it's called. The original game, I think that's an Evelyn Novakovic composition that really works. You know, it's a lot better than Northern Hemispheres in terms of being an actual song. But we're gonna have to put that conversation on hold because we have a new stage. Look at that dithering in the background, Jesus Christ. Like, he could have probably just made that a solid color. But regardless. This is Sunken Spruce. This is the worst level, or one of the worst levels in Pacifica. The first couple levels we played, Stormy Seas and Dingy Drainpipe, those levels are fine. I think they're fun little stages that at least, you know, kind of look new. Sunken Spruce is more of the same shit from Floodlit Fish. By the way, I guess as long as, you know, I keep mentioning that they at least look different and behave different. That background, completely new. Never featured in the original game, as far as I know. So they made a completely new background for this. And just the idea of the stage is at least kind of interesting. We are playing a tree level that's underwater. So that's something it's a Hailfire Peaks, so to speak. That's kind of fun and different and interesting. And the background is like some kind of ancient ruins or something. Or perhaps it's Kremlantis from Donkey Kong Land 1, for all we know. And I don't know, this level, it's kind of claustrophobic, in my opinion. Kind of an annoying stage to play. I know that when I was playing, doing my test playthrough, kept dying all the time because of stuff I could barely see. And it's just not a super fun level to play. Like, with a better camera, I would probably enjoy the stage more. But as is, it also kind of feels a little bit mazy, honestly. That I'll take full blame for. It's just like, it's another one of those things, when you've played a game long enough, when you've replayed a game enough times, anything can seem easy. I mean, it's just like, I don't know. I'm sure that applies to DKC 2 just as much. Like, that's a game that really doesn't challenge me all that much anymore. Just because I played it so many times, but, you know, still, I can look at the difficulty design of DKC 2 and appreciate how well done it is, how well thought out it is. With DKC 3, I feel like it's a little sloppier, I'm not gonna lie. At levels like Confused Cliffs, where it's just kind of like claustrophobic stage to play. And even when you do know what to do and it's easier, it's still not all that fun to play. That's kind of the big problem with this third game as a whole, is I feel like even when you know what to do, the game's just kind of a little dull. Not so much so, like, I can still get some fun out of this, it's still a good game and all that. It's worth playing if you like the first two, sure, but, you know, like, as I always say, if you didn't like DKC 1, and especially if DKC 2 didn't even do all that much for you, you're not gonna like this game either. It's not gonna do anything to change your mind. Maybe there's someone in the comments who did not like the first two, or was introduced to the series with this third game. I guess I was, now that I think about it. But I know that if I had played DKC 2 first, that would have been, you know, I would have had more issues to speak of when it comes to this third game. But what was I getting at? I don't remember. Ooh, Dr. Pepper leaves an interesting aftertaste, I gotta say. Might need to grab a bottle of water real quick and cleanse my taste buds. Gotta have something to keep me caffeinated, kitties. And at this point, I'm like immune to the powers of caffeine. Like, it takes a lot of it, because I'm just so used to I'm so dependent on it that it doesn't... Like, I've met people who can drink, like, teeny tiny 8-ounce cup of coffee, and that'll keep them up all night. I'm just like, bitch, I could still fall asleep while drinking one of those. I need a lot of caffeine, damn it. I'm drinking soda all my life, drinking coffee for quite a long time. It needs my regular caffeine fix throughout the day to stay awake. I cannot tell you how many energy drinks or whatever I've drunk whilst editing videos, for one thing. And come to think of it, I don't think I've ever been up there. Yep, there's a extra life. Good addition. Here's the last bonus room real quick. I think I was talking about Frosty Frolics. Frosty Frolics in the original is... Oh, by the way, this is a really annoying fucking bonus room on the tiny screen. You have to dodge these bosses. That's what these eels are called. And the timer is really fucking strict for some reason. Like, you'd better start hauling ass the moment you start up the room, or you could very easily run out of time. And on the small screen, it is very, very easy to get yourself hit and have to restart the whole thing again. So, I don't know, not a huge fan of that one. It's easier when you have the game upscaled, like I've been saying. But still, you're playing this on the original hardware it was designed for, and it's annoying. By the way, I just realized that I completely forgot to go to a Brothers Bear character. We'll go chat with the Brothers Bear character after the stage, which is kind of a fun level, if I do say so myself. This level is called Cliffside Blast, I think it's called. And it's basically like Bramble Blast from DKC2. We've got the whole level takes place inside of barrel cannons, which is, you know, it's always fun. It's a simple, straightforward idea that's fun to play. And that's what I think the best parts of the DKC trilogy do best, is when they can take a very straightforward idea and just kind of expound upon it and play around for it for a whole stage. And this is a level that does that pretty well. This is probably, honestly, now that I think about it, probably my favorite cliff-themed level in the game. I say that and then I get hit. Is that a way to repay me, game? I'm just gonna skip the Special K cereal over there because I don't care that much. And I keep thinking I'm gonna get hit by him. Oh, God. Okay. Frosty Frolics. I don't know, I guess, and I've been talking about how creative the other levels were. This is easily the least creative one, but it feels like a good level that could have been in the original game. So, I don't know, I don't really have any complaints about it. It's a straightforward little challenge, except when that shit happens. And yeah, Frosty Frolics, to finally fucking explain what I've been trying to say about that. The original track, it's a very Evelyn Novakovic track, but I think it works. It works pretty well. That's an example of a time where Evelyn Novakovic, her focus on ambiance, really hits the spot. For an ice level, that's the kind of sound you want. And you know, it's very different from Ice Cave Chant, which she also worked on. And that's one case where I do think that the remake song isn't as good. For the most part, I feel like David Weiss's contributions are at least on par with or superior to the original tracks. Like with a case like Nuts and Bolts, I feel like they're pretty evenly matched. I could go for either or. With cases like Waterworld, on the other hand, I gotta give it hands down to the remake soundtrack. But in the case of Rockface Rumble, I like them both. You know, the coin was obviously over there, so you guys can figure out. But in the case of Frosty Frolics, I've gotta give it heads. The original tracks is heads and shoulders above. It's a lot better than the new one. For some reason, David Weiss thought like a traditional German kind of winter song, like a yodeling song, would be a good fit for an ice level. So like the first chunk of the song is like a bunch of yodeling and German sounding kind of polka music. And then the back half of the song is just a bunch of ambiance. Like Rockface Rumble in this game does that too, but I think that the core melody is strong enough that I can kind of get over that. By the way, we have more fucking copters, because we didn't get enough of that in Razor Ridge. We need more of the same thing. I guess that's a complaint I would have about the stage, but, you know. But as you can hear right now, like, once you get to a certain part of Rockface Rumble, it just starts playing a bunch of nature sounds. And that goes on for like a minute, I swear, before the loop picks up again. And I'm not sure why that's in the song. What's it fucking called? Frosty Frolics does that too. Like, it's like 2 minutes of yodeling and polka music, and then it's kind of more of this kind of sound, and it's just like, I gotta give it to Evelyn Novakovic's Frosty Frolics on this one. On that one, rather. Rockface Rumble is one where I like both tracks for completely different reasons. So I'd say it's one where they're pretty evenly matched. Like, Rockface Rumble, you want like a really good mountain-sounding song. Evelyn Novakovic's the way to go. If you want something that's really catchy and memorable, then I'm gonna go with the GBA Rockface Rumble. Like, I really like this song. It's one of my favorite DKC songs ever. So yeah, Frosty Frolics, definitely gonna have to go with Evelyn Novakovic on that one. Let's see, Mill Fever, that's not one I've talked about. Mill Fever, you know, song that plays in the mill levels. By the way, Rip Curl Reef, I don't know what the fucking deal is with those Lurchins. Obviously it's a palette swap, but I don't know if it's some kind of glitch with my cartridge. Like, I don't know if you were, like, somebody else who owns this game, pop it in and boot up Rip Curl Reef and tell me what color these Lurchins are, because I honestly would like to know if they are supposed to be gold and have green spikes. Or thorns, I guess they would be called. But the gimmick of this level, it's kind of like the last chunk of Animal Antics, where you're like kind of in a small confined space and you got wind pushing you around. And meanwhile, you've gotta dodge all the enemies and the hazards and whatnot. Oh, we have enough coins for the thing. That's interesting. Now let's grab him real quick. By the way, there's a bonus barrel down over here, and the level does get kind of mazy here. This level, it's okay, I guess. I mean, it's one of those cases, I have so much practice with it that it doesn't really offend me at this point, but still. Trying to dodge some of these Lurchins in these cramped little hallways with the wind, it's way more annoying than the Squawk section was in Animal Antics, if you ask me, if you want my opinion. Which evidently you do if you're watching this, especially up to this point. Lost my train of thought. Okay, got the thing. I almost... Fuck! That is not what I wanted to happen. But thankfully it pops you off, or drops you off right next to the barrel so you can just try again. Which is always swell, I appreciate that. And I know, I guess I will take the blame on that, even though the hitbox was clearly wrong. If you look back at the footage... Actually, Editor Michael, put up slow-mo and show the hitbox on that. Like, if you look at that, I swear to God, I was like nowhere, I didn't actually touch the enemy and I still took a hit. Hitboxes are a hard thing to get right in 2D. Because you can only make them, you know, you can only have squares, and you can like layer multiple hitboxes over each other to make it more uniform, but there's only so much you can do when everything's, you know, quantized to pixels like this. Whereas in 3D, you can make 3D hitboxes and stuff. And in the case of Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, it makes it worse. But that's a conversation for a roar that will probably never happen, because people don't like it when I talk about Crash. So, I don't know. It's like, the remakes of the second and third game are pretty well done, but the remake of Crash 1 feels... It's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of this game just a little bit, but probably worse. It feels like all they had to do was not fuck up and it would be a replace, you know? But they make so many mistakes that are kind of baffling and don't really fix a lot of what was wrong with the original game design, and in fact make things worse in a couple cases. Especially when it comes to the hitboxes and the physics and how Crash moves around. Like everybody who's played the games talked about this. Unless you've been living under a rock, you will know that fans of the original Crash trilogy will tell you that the physics in the Insane trilogy don't feel right, and it led to accidental deaths. And I can confirm, even as someone who did not really grow up with Crash 1 at all, I can confirm that it makes the game more irritating to play, especially the bridge levels. And that's kind of like the main thing. I guess I'm reviewing the game anyway, like I did with Sonic Mania earlier. I guess I'll keep this brief then. Crash Insane Trilogy, like, I think they literally took the Crash 3 physics and just used them for all three games, which sounds fine. Like, you wouldn't think that they'd be that different, but I guess Crash 1 had a floatier jump, and all three games had a cubic hitbox, so it's kind of like how in a 2D platformer, how, like, you can not technically be standing on top of the ground or something and still be standing on it, you know? It's kind of the same thing in the original Crash Bandicoot trilogy. You did not have to have your entire model on top of a chunk of geometry or a platform for the collision detection to kick in and count it as you standing on it. Whereas in the Insane trilogy, they changed it so that you have like a cylindrical or a capsule-shaped hitbox. So unless if you have both of your feet square on top of a platform, you will slip off and die. And if you're playing like the bonus rooms where you have to like bounce off of boxes and stuff, unless if you bounce off of the crate like dead center, you're slipping off and dying, and then you have to redo the bonus room again, which is just fucking annoying. I mean, it's just like, it was kind of a damned if you did, damned if you didn't kind of situation where like, you could make the physics different for all three games like they were originally, but then you have people complain that they had to get used to a different feel for each one when it was supposed to be kind of like one package. But when you play Crash 1, it really feels like they built the levels with the, initial physics and collision detection in mind. And when you strip that away from the game, it takes a game that's already pretty challenging, let's be honest here. Even if you've grown up with Crash 1 and you have all the stages memorized, even if you played it for the first time and thought it was not the hardest game in the world, you've got to admit, it is not a super easy game by any means. There is challenging stuff in Crash 1, especially towards the end. And imagine playing a game that's already pretty challenging to begin with, when the controls don't feel right, when it feels like you're slipping off of platforms that you should have landed on, when it feels like the jump height is like smaller, so you have to like really force it. It would be like if you were playing a 2D platformer, and the platforms in most of Crash 1 is a 2D platformer, to be frank. Like fucking Sunset Vista is a 2D platforming stage, basically. Imagine playing a 2D platformer where the platforms were like your jump was like so short and not all that floaty and very abrupt, where all of the platforms were spaced out as far as physically possible. So it basically means that every time you want to make a jump, you have to go to the very, very edge of the platform and hold the button down all the way, every single jump. And that's what the Crash Insane trilogy feels like for Crash 1. I've only played a little bit of Crash 2 and 3 in that collection, And as far as I know, the Crash 3 controls obviously are going to work for Crash 3 because that's what they were designed with to begin with. Crash 2 doesn't really feel that different from Crash 3. I'm sure there's minor differences. So it feels fine. But Crash 1, controls, you need those original hitboxes and you need the better physics, or the more forgiving physics, because that's what the game was built around. And when you don't have those things, it makes the levels feel artificially harder. It feels like, what's that word? Not penalty. Handicapping. It feels like a handicap, where you have an already challenging game that, for the most part, I'd say is pretty, I haven't been paying attention to this at all, so I should probably just write it down real quick and get through it. Imagine playing an already, actually, we'll pause there. Actually, alright, I'll finish up my thoughts here real quick. Imagine playing an already challenging game, and, you know, you can tell me that the game's easy, and a lot of people have, but I'm just saying, Crash 1 is not an easy game by any means, especially if you're playing it for the first time and aren't used to how the controls feel and all that. Where it feels like, because of how the controls are designed and how your hitbox works, the game feels harder on top of that. It feels like handicapping. And it's like so many people have always stressed the importance of controls in reviews. People will tell you how important control is, but when it comes to Crash Insane Trilogy, apparently it doesn't count. And it's just like, all they had to do was, you know, like literally they could have copied over the old controls and it would have just been fine. At least have the option, you know what I'm saying? And it sounds like the Vicarious Visions have no plans to patch in any options or make any changes. Or no, maybe they changed it since I last played it and I just missed the announcement on that. But as far as I know, they responded to the criticisms and said, yeah, we're not changing it, basically. So, yeah. Maybe I'll play more of the Crash 2 and Crash 3 remakes in the Insane Trilogy and say, this is pretty well done. Maybe they are really well done. I know for a fact that the controls feel better there and that the games overall were easier than Crash 1, and the platforming was not as demanding and bottomless pit intensive. So it would probably play better. But in terms of Crash 1, like Crash 2 and Crash 3 were relatively competent games to begin with, so there's not too much you can improve. You know, besides graphics and stuff like that. But with Crash 1, that was the most flawed game in the trilogy. And even if you like the game, even if you grew up with it and think it's pretty good and still holds up wherever, you have to admit, out of the 3 games, it has aged the most and had the most room for improvement. And so the fact that the Crash 1 remake is like the worst one to play and isn't the definitive version when there was no reason for it not to be, with, you know, being an HD remake made in 2017 and all that, that to me is really disappointing. And it kind of reminds me of this game, where it was like all they had to do was not fuck up. All they had to do, and that, you know, that's frustrating. All they had to do was put in the status screen. All they had to do was put in the scrapbook. All they had to do was have, you know, a separate boss theme for the final boss. All they had to do was make the camera work in Floodlight Fish. And then you play the game, and it's like, because it was rushed, they didn't have time to do any of those things. And because of that, the game feels like a lower quality standard than it really ought to be. And that is frustrating. And that's what I feel about the Crash 1 remake. There was no reason for it not to be leaps and bounds ahead of the original version. It'd be a replace, essentially. But realistically, I think it's a remake because they make parts of it actively worse. And it's not like this game where it's kind of like a couple small kind of minor things that I don't like. The controls feel wrong. And that is a big problem. And there are a bunch of other things I didn't like either, but that's the big one, really. So, yeah. And if I say that, people would massacre me on my channel, which is why I'm not sure I want to do a remake or re-break on Crash Insane Trilogy. I know none of you cared, and this kind of ended up being like that Sonic Mania episode again. But, you know, like I said, I just kind of drift into topics and talk about them. If you thought the controls in Crash 1 on the Insane Trilogy were fine, good for you. I'm telling you that I could not I was consistently struggling with them and running into problems because of them. And I played the original around the same time, and it's just like the bridge levels, like Road to Nowhere. I died like 1 billion times in Road to Nowhere in the remake because it is so fucking annoying to land on those tiny bridge planks when you have a capsule-shaped hitbox that makes you slip off if you don't jump in the dead center. But then you play it on the PS1, and that's not a problem at all because of the box, the cubic hitboxes. So you can jump on the very edge of those planks and still have it count, which is how the levels were designed to be played to begin with. And it's just, yeah, I've gone on enough about this. I thought the remake of Crash 1 was not very well done, and I was very disappointed in it. That's what I thought. Murder me if you must, but that's my honest to God opinion. And I'm not sure how understanding people are gonna be of that. I mean, it seems to be kind of a unanimous opinion that the controls are a problem in the Insane Trilogy, but still. It's just the fact that I would even criticize the original version would probably get me some guff. Regardless, this has been another long episode. So, join me next time, and I don't know, I think this was episode 11. Join me in episode 12, and we'll finish off Pacifica. Until then, I'm Exo, and I hope you enjoyed the episode.